Hey, this is the Daily Overpass. My name is Eric and I make apps. Now today I want to talk about getting started in a business. Okay, so it's 8 p.m. I'm in the office. Today has just been a really hectic day. I've just been slammed with client work. So a lot of the clients that we've had in the past few years have contacted me in the last couple of days, either with enhancements or issues and things that just have to be seen to. So it's been, yesterday when I talked about freedoms, some days you just run off your feet, and that's just part of the game. When you do client work especially, you don't have, when I talk about being able to set your own schedule, sometimes with client work you don't have that. They have these things called deadlines and all that stuff. So, but that's just the way things work. I just wanted to thank everybody yesterday for all the great comments you left and everything. I felt a bit vulnerable, I guess, talking about that stuff. I felt like, here I am just talking about me, and I didn't want to be just, boring. I felt like I just turned on the camera and started talking, wasn't sure where I was going to go with it, which is what I normally do anyway. But you all asked a lot of really good questions, and there's a lot of you, I think, want to start up your own company if you haven't already, or you're thinking about it. And Gabor, you asked a lot of really good questions, and I keep thinking I'll answer all these, but I think it will take a long time. So we'll visit all those things as we go. But the first thing I wanted to say is, I just wanted to give a just be completely plain and open. It's like, I don't necessarily know what I'm doing, right? It's, to me, running the company and getting everything off the ground is a bit like being a parent. You go from one step to the next, and then you're in over your head, and then you figure your way out of that. So like when you have kids, you think you can't imagine yourself as a parent, and then the kids come and you think, okay, now what do I do? What do I have to learn? What do I have to do this? And we face this a lot as app developers. We face it as business owners. If you do client work, you face it that way too. We all know this. You have an app idea, you learn, so then you think, what do you do next? So you have to learn how to code it, or who to hire, and get it out there. And then once you get it out there, you realize, well, nobody's buying it, nobody's downloading it. What do I have to do now? Well, I have to learn about ASO, I have to learn about keywords, I have to learn about app store optimization and running ads and that kind of stuff. And doing a company, when I started, God, I made so many mistakes. I went to my bookshelf. So I'll just tell you this real quick. When I started out, my company was in 2004, but I mostly did contract work. But I would take these long periods of time where I take off and I think, I want to set up my own client base. I want to do client work, not just me, but I want to hire developers overseas, and then we'll just take local clients, and then we'll set up a company and all this kind of stuff. And so, so I set up a website, I got the business cards, all that kind of stuff, Overpass is open for business and everything. And then I didn't really do anything. But then I realized I had to go out and get people. So I thought, I'll do some cold calling. That's what everybody does as a company. You have to do cold calling. But I didn't want to just jump into it, because why would you do that? So I need to research. I need to know everything before I go. It's really naive, right, when I say this, but so I read all these books. I was going through my bookshelf today, and here's some of the ones that I have. Cold Calling Techniques That Really Work by Steven Schiffman. I read like 4 of this guy's books. I've got Secrets of Telephone Selling, right? So I've got, and I've written so many, sales scripts and all this stuff. And I've also got, just to cover all the bases, I've also got Never Cold Call Again, right? So, and in the early days when I was doing this, so I'd leave like a contract that was perfectly high-paying contract, and I would set out and I would try to do my own thing. I wanted to start my own software company, but I needed clients, so that was the whole thing. So I set up the company. Then the next step is, how do I get clients? So then I started doing cold calling, and I tell you what, guys, that was like probably the saddest thing. If you had seen me do it, it's the saddest thing ever. I probably only called about half a dozen companies, right? It was over months. It was just terrible. And you'd call up, and it was a lot like asking someone out on a date, right? Because you think the conversation is going just fine until they realize what's going on. It's like, hey, how's it going? Yeah, good. How about you? Yeah, good. Yeah, so anyway, I was wondering if you want to go out Tuesday night. So it was like that. Yeah, so it was really, really sad. So so then I'd go back to a contract, but I'd also work on my own software, and I'd start, you know, working on websites and stuff like that. And the problem that I had, and I still do have this to a degree, is that when I work on something for myself, I get to be, that perfectionist comes in, and I start thinking, oh, I'll just add one more thing or whatever, or I'll work on something for maybe as much as 3 weeks, but then, you know, other priorities come up, or I'll have like a different idea and I'll move on to the other thing. So when I did the first app, I started coding it myself, but in the end I hired a development company in India to do it, and they did a horrible job, but you know, it's in the end it was something that I could release to the App Store, right? So now we have lots of clients now, sometimes more than we can handle. And one of the things that I realize now, having a company, just in retrospect, is that if nobody knows about you, then they're not going to buy from you. So we spend a lot of time on content marketing, a lot of time on putting stuff out there, you know, putting our own apps out there. But when I talk about like last year, about 80% of our revenue was from the apps and 20% was from clients. But in terms of stress, it was like 80% of stress came from client work and 20% came from apps. So, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, I am not an expert. There's still some things I need to learn. There's things I need to go. But you know, those of you who are thinking about starting your own company, my advice would be just to start. You know, you're gonna stumble forward and you're just gonna get it done. Don't quit your job. Don't hire a bunch of people unless you're really, really confident. And I've never been that confident. If there's one thing that I suppose I take a lot of risks, but I don't take unreasonable risks. There's a reason why, you know, my developers are overseas, is because it's a lower price and it's easier to move on if it doesn't work. And there's a reason, you know, we put out so many apps, is because, you know, I don't want to invest 6 months or a year or 2 years in one app and put it out there and hope that it does well. And that's just, you know, because that's a very risky situation. Now you could argue that the quality of my apps is not as high as it should be, and that might be true, but it is, you know, trying to minimize the risks and put stuff, you know, and things like that. Even with client work, the nice thing about now is that we get more requests for client work that we can handle. So, you know, most of it I turn down is just because mainly it's because of days like today where I'm thinking, oh man, you know, either I hire more people or, you know, I learn to work more efficiently and stuff like that. So anyway, the point I wanted to make today, first of all, thank you so much for the comments yesterday. And first of all, you know, and to say that why I learn things as I go, you know, I don't consider myself an expert, and but it's the same with everything. And I think the best way to learn something is to do it and just you know, stumble forward. When we talk about apps, and somebody will say like, hey, I released an app you know, 6 months ago. By the way, some of you have had like really good downloads, which is awesome. But you know, I released an app 6 months ago. I've had like 5 downloads, and I think, I think, well, you know, good for you. You've done something. You know, most people don't, or most people's, you know, they'll tell you their app idea, and they'll want you to build it for them, or they want to remove all risk from the situation. They don't want to invest money in it. They don't want to invest time in it. They don't want to, you know, do all that kind of stuff. And risk is something that is always being allocated. You know, when you're a permanent employee working someplace, you work for a company that assumes all the risk of making sure you have all the work, but you have very little risk. And if you're a contractor, you assume the risk of finding work and finding, you know, contracts. If you work for clients, you assume the risk of, you know, finding clients, and they assume the risk of that their project will work. And when you produce your own apps, you assume the risk of making sure that app works and you have the revenue that comes in and everything like that. Anyway, dude, another rambling on video. Sorry about that. Hey, if you are going to start, you know, get started. You know, there's nothing, you know, God, there's nothing wrong with starting and it not working. You know, there's no, you know, I don't think the reason we don't start is because we don't want to look stupid, and you don't want to risk everything, and you don't want to put your family in jeopardy. But, you know, you can handle a lot more than you think. So anyway, that's just my opinion. You know, what do I know? I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.